Hey, imagine you're sitting on the couch, the evening's movie queued up, and you're debating whether to splurge on a high-end sound system or just stick with the TV's built-in speakers. I've been in that spot more times than I'd like to admit, especially when I'm trying to convince a friend who's already terrified of blowing his budget on gear that turns out to sound like a cheap nightclub. If you're wrestling with that same question, you're not alone. Most of us worry about buying something that looks impressive on paper but ends up being a glorified set of tweeters that still can't pull the dialogue off the screen. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Shockwafe 11.2.6 from the Nakamichi store throws a lot of claims into the mix: Dolby Atmos DTSX, dual 10-inch wireless subwoofers, and a 300 watt rating that sounds like a home theater on steroids. The first thing I wanted to figure out was whether all that power actually translates into a nighttime which the explosions feel real instead of loud. To do that, I dug into the specs, read the handful of user comments that do exist, and watched a couple of YouTube walkthroughs. The takeaways boil down to 3 practical questions. 1. Do I get clearer dialogue without constantly turning the volume up? 2. Does the bass stay tight enough that I won't hear it slosh around my apartment walls? 3. Will the whole package fit my living room without turning it into a mini concert hall? Let's start with dialogue. The Soundbar's 54-inch chassis is unusually wide for a single-bar unit, and that width allows the drivers to spread sound across a broader horizontal plane. In the test clips I saw, characters speaking in fast-paced action movies came through distinctly, even on a lower volume setting. That's a real plus if you've ever been annoyed by trying to catch a whisper in a thriller while the background score barrels ahead. The Dolby Atmos engine claims to bounce sound off the ceiling, creating a sense of height. In a small to medium-sized bedroom, a height effect was subtle but present. You could hear a faint upward sweep on a helicopter scene, which added immersion without becoming a gimmick. Now, the dual 10-inch wireless subwoofers are the headline here. In theory, 2 subs should deliver deeper, more controlled low frequencies than a single box. In practice, you get a noticeable difference when you fire up a bass-heavy soundtrack like Mad Max: Fury Road. The subs respond quickly, and the bass feels like it's moving rather than just pounding. Because they're wireless, placement flexibility is a real benefit. You can tuck one under the couch and the other near a wall to balance the rumble. However, the wireless link can be a little finicky. If your Wi-Fi network is loaded, you may notice a tiny lag, especially during fast action scenes. For most households that use the subs only for movies, that latency isn't a deal-breaker, but it's something to be aware of if you plan on using the system for gaming where every millisecond counts. Connectivity is another area where the 11.2.6 tries to stand out. It offers HDMI eARC plus 2 HDMI 2.1 inputs, meaning you can hook up a 4K per 120Hz TV, a next-gen console, and still have a spare port for a streaming box. The eARC handshake was smooth in every demo I watched, and the soundbar passed the lip sync test, which is a blessing for anyone who has ever watched a movie where the actors' mouths were out of sync with the dialogue. If you're using a streaming stick or a Blu-ray player, you won't need an extra optical cable. Everything runs through the HDMI connection, keeping your setup tidy. On the downside, the sheer size of the bar and the dual subwoofers can become a spatial issue. The 54-inch width means the bar stretches almost the entire length of a 55-inch TV. If you have a slim TV stand or a wall-mounted screen, you'll need to make sure there's enough clearance behind the bar for proper ventilation. The subwoofers themselves are 10-inch units with a fairly large footprint. They sit on the floor and can dominate a small living room corner. If you live in a studio or a tight apartment, you might find the subs feel intrusive, and you could end up with low-frequency vibration that seeps through the floor and into neighboring rooms, a potential complaint from downstairs neighbors. Who should consider this system? If you're a movie buff who watches a lot of action, sci-fi, or immersive content and you have a medium to large room, think 1520 SQM. The Shockwafe 11.2.6 gives you a cinema-like experience without splurging on a full 7.1.2 speaker array. It's also a solid pick for gamers who want that extra atmospheric punch. Just keep in mind the minor latency I mentioned earlier. Additionally, families with kids who love superhero movies will appreciate the clear dialogue and the dramatic bass that makes explosions feel impactful without constantly upping the volume. Who should skip it? If you're living in a cramped studio, have a modest budget, or primarily use your TV